Good evening, everyone. Welcome. My name is Joe Davich, and I'm the Executive Director here at the Georgia Center for the Book. And on behalf of the Georgia Center for the Book, the DeKalb County Public Library, and the DeKalb Library Foundation, and the 15 other state centers for the book on the East Coast, I am pleased to welcome you this evening to the Route 1 Reads Poetry Reading for 2021. If you'd like to find out about more of the Centers for the Book and the Library of Congress, I encourage you to go to read.gov or loc.gov. The Centers for the Book were created in 1977 by then President Jimmy Carter, and currently we have 53 affiliate centers working all around the United States and in territories like the U.S. Virgin Islands and Puerto Rico. I'd like to thank all of the poets that are joining us live this evening and those poets that have submitted videos for us to play this evening as part of the reading as well. In the chat, you'll find links to local independent bookstores and small independent and university presses from which our poets' books can be available. Like so many independent bookstores across this country, they have been the lifeblood and the saving grace for us during this pandemic, mailing books to homes, delivering books to doorsteps, and sometimes providing contactless pickup. So we would encourage you, no matter where you are in the United States, to shop at your local independent bookstore, especially our Black-owned independent bookstores, because they are truly the cornerstone of our economy. And if we want to build a truly just society, we need to support them as well. So right now, I'd like to get this reading started by telling you a little bit more about Route 1 Reads and starting off with some of our poets this evening. Connecting the 2,369 miles of US Route 1 from Fort Kent, Maine to Key West, Florida, the Route 1 Reads initiative is a partnership between 16 affiliate centers for the book to promote books that illuminate important aspects of their states or commonwealths for readers traveling this meandering highway. The initiative was launched at the 2015 National Book Festival in Washington, D.C., and over the years have featured fiction and nonfiction books in varying genres: cooking, mystery, historical fiction, biography, travel, and this year's selection, poetry. Told in ancient caves around campfires and recited from bunting-draped white marble rostrums, poetry is an ancient and evocative form of expression, celebrated in every language and culture around the globe. Evolving into different types and genres, poetry uses form and interpretation to elicit a response from the reader. Tales of heroism, songs of heartache, all have rhyme, meter, and other stylistic elements unique to their form of expression. Epic to elegy, song to psalm, poetry endures and inspires, whether written introspectively in a journal or slammed on a stage. The poetry selections in the 2020-21 Route 1 Reads reading list represent the great poetry traditions from each of our states. History, homage, reflection, and revolution are distilled down to stanzas, couplets, lines, and words. Tonight, we begin our literary trip down Route 1 in the vacation land of Maine. Maine, our only state with just one syllable, became a state on March 15, 1820, and was once known as the Pine Tree State. In fact, Maine's state flower isn't a flower, but the white pine cone and tassel. Tonight, we will hear from Amanda Detman, reading selections from A New Land, 30 groundbreaking poems by youth poets. Welcome, Amanda.
Thank you so much. Hi, everybody. My name's Amanda, and I'm so excited to kick off this night with Route 1 Reads representing Maine. And a big shout out to anybody I know out there. I love you, I miss you, and I'm sending all that good energy back your way. I know that when I was younger, I didn't have a poetry anthology of writers my own age. So I have it right next to me, A New Land, and this is by 30 youth poets. We have 30 poems in here. A couple of the poets have more than one. And our introduction is by Amanda Gorman, and it received praise from Richard Blanco. And I really think that by reading poems of writers my own age, I not only see my present reality represented, but I also see, who I can become and the possibilities of that. So I wrote this pandemic poem in March of 2020. And as you can see, I'm still performing it. It was inspired by everyone in New York City clapping on their rooftops and their balconies as we heard the world unite through distance. And I hope you receive what you need from this poem tonight. When they ask me what will be the first thing I do after this is over, I do not know what it feels like to give birth to a child. But right now there is a sound sizzling every night at 7 p.m. across New York City, across rooftops and gutters and stickered bus benches, clapping for doctors, nurses, everyone on the front lines, city as an entire city stopping to make the same motion at the same time. A 10-year-old clapping while her moon landing puzzle pieces cartwheel across the woven rug. A 45-year-old mother clapping while her tomatillo soup sings, her engagement ring a ballet, not of being found, but of finding someone who sees. A 98-year-old great grandfather clapping, standing at his window with his bent cane, glasses so unfogged and unafraid, it hurts a little to open wider. How weird for pieces of the body to choose themselves. For we have always known foreign freckles, wrinkled, unrelated palms, cherry thumbs, not our own, sandpapering the same space they both call home, our dangling limbs touching each other so more people can touch again. And there is a plant named bougainvillea. I am naming my daughter Bougainvillea, the daughter we are all growing during this time, because she will stretch, taking nothing for granted, into a new vine we call now, we call Monday afternoons, at the office we call nights, sipping wine with strangers. Nothing will taste bitter again. Bougainvillea will thirst to say thank you, anytime, anywhere, with anyone. Bougainvillea will feed on first, a feast of anything, any place, any moment, anybody, because we have forgotten how starved we have been. How a quarter of an inch of butter did not mean a thing. A paper movie ticket, scissors through hair, sleeping next to someone, sharing the same spoon. Holding my grandmother has been a decade of drought, and all the water is yelling at me, do it now. Do it now. We are in battle, this battle, to prove that bougainvillea is a climbing plant, even when the dictionary says its flowers are insignificant and cannot move. To prove that we are not machines addicted to repetition, addicted to repetition, addicted to repetition. Our papery green thumbs were once born as thin sheets of metal, once gloved and greedy, masked and eyeless. Our thumbs were shields to touch and be touched, to kiss and be kissed, to breathe and be breathed into. We have forgotten that a fly can still find its fire, even in capture, and we are that fly. Bougainvillea, you are blind now, but I promise one day you'll photograph this world in its most naked state of being. Black and white. No one is there. Click, snap, flutter, flare. You will name a plastic grocery bag, dancing in air, alone on the street, as its own word. This. Thank you.
So thank you so much, Amanda. That was wonderful. New Hampshire, the Granite State, where their motto is live free or die, is represented on Route 1 Reads this year by COVID Spring, Granite State Pandemic Poems, edited by Alexandra Perry. But our next stop along Route 1 Reads is Massachusetts, the Old Bay State. Earning statehood on February 6, 1788, in 1620, a ship called the Mayflower arrived at Cape Cod, carrying settlers called Pilgrims. And in 1876, Alexander Graham Bell demonstrated the first telephone. In 1639, America's first post office opened in Boston. Massachusetts also figures heavily into US history, with the Boston Tea Party, the battles of Lexington and Concord becoming the first fight of the Revolutionary War. But Massachusetts is also quite famous for foods, like baked beans, or their state dessert, Boston cream pie, or their state cookie, the chocolate chip cookie. Tonight, we will hear from poet Karun Kapoor, reading from her book, Women in the Waiting Room. Karun?
Hello, it's lovely to be here. Thanks so much to the Georgia Center for the Book and to the Massachusetts Center for the Book for helping to bring all of this together. I'm particularly delighted by the idea that we're all stretched out along the beautiful coastline and to be with poets I admire so much. I'm going to read from Women in the Waiting Room 2 poems tonight. This is my second collection, and it's a book that explores women's stories and voices, all kinds of women, friends, strangers, humans, goddesses, but all of them are returning from the far reaches of some experience, illness, violence, grief, fear, or even love. And they're struggling in the face of that experience to find their voice. So it's a book about speech and silence and how we make our way back to our voices. This first poem is the first in the book, and it's a poem that thinks about the great Hindu epic poem, the Ramayana, which many of you may know is about not just its namesake, Lord Ram, but also about his wife, Sita, who in the course of the story is carried away by a demon. On looking at myself in the mirror, or rereading Valmiki's Ramayana, anyone can disappear across the black water. Every girl can be taught. Her middle name is shame. When will I burn the urge for purity? My bones are a furnace. My face is a game. Every girl steals away with a demon at some point. All her alphabets, ankle bells, all her braids. She will meet herself in the third person. She will lie with her fear. She will dress in her rage. The world is curdled with husbands, blue as the gods, gentle as flame. And the second poem is the last poem in the book. And this one was inspired by Massachusetts in some ways. There's a river near my house, the Merrimack, which I live quite near. And I find myself wanting to visit it often and see what it's doing, as though it's a person who needs to be checked on and who keeps me company. Let me be as a river. Nothing but motion, muck-mouthed, mud-hearted, brackish, all dirty at the lip, with rise and fall that exposes hull-gouging stones. No curiosity about source, no knowledge of destination, just willingness to bear anything right to the end. Silver as fish skin, 1 hour wrinkled, 2 hours smooth, duck-fouled, trash-choked, silent, then gossiping under a full red moon. Let me be dredged when the leggy girls go missing, used for a slow cruise, churned for speed, reeking of the unseen ocean, or veiled in the scent of pine trees, a fog in the head, then clear as the tip of a pin. Enough beauty to draw blood, enough anger to strip the banks, enough fullness to carry the pleasure boats high. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Karen. Those were 2 lovely, lovely poems. Next is our smallest state. Called the Ocean State or Little Rhode Island became a state on May 29th, 1790. Founded as the Rhode Island colony in 1636 by Roger Williams, a man who had been banished from the nearby Massachusetts Bay colony because of his religious beliefs. In 1776, Rhode Island became the first colony to declare independence from Great Britain, but it was the last of the original 13 colonies to ratify the US Constitution in order to join the Union. Tonight we'll hear from poet Michael Klein, reading from Then We Were Still Living. Michael?
Thank you, everybody, for being here and for the Georgia Center for the Book and looking at a book that I haven't looked at since I wrote it. Excuse me. So this is a book, I should say, this is a book that was written after 9/11. Myself and two friends of mine, two poets, Donna Massini and Marie Howe, went up to a monastery near Poughkeepsie, New York, the weekend after 9/11. And we were there for like 2 or 3 days, and I basically channeled this whole book in that weekend. I mean, I added some stuff, but the real poems were written, and there wasn't a lot of revision. And it was the first time I had an experience like that. And I really became part of the landscape I was in too, which it's not a new experience for me, but it was in context of what was happening. It had a different luster to it. This is called The Twin. When was America ever the world we grew up with? Didn't it stop being that somewhere in the 50s after Truman? Hadn't it stopped having the windy day idea, the refugee, the glamour girl, the gangster, the whiskey-driven dice down the plains, the New Deal, the public love, the wheat, the music of wheat, Robert Flaherty, James Agee, Dorothea Lange, or just before, the American parades clashing down 2 avenues, when Charles Ives would stand somewhere in the middle so he could listen to 2 different kinds of music, steep into the same sky, because they were both his life. This is called 2001. But wasn't it always a scene in a movie to delay it in the world? The always movie. In America, we make movies before anything really happens. It wasn't like the movies, and it wasn't real. It was in our entirety, emptying into the fully realized emptiness. Then we were still dead. Then we were lost on our own soil. Then we were still living. And I'll read one more. This is called The Twin. I wasn't supposed to have a body. I'm not from a family of bodies. None of us were supposed to have bodies. But then the light left us off in the dark chamber, and each of us stood in the hall of her old heart beating. My mother and my brother were there. I was inhabiting a body of company. Could I have my own, apart from the one I was inside, apart from the one floating next to me, which looked like mine? My soul was already confused. It didn't know how consciousness pulled the body into the world or pulled it out of the world. My soul was inside the inside. All this, I was thinking, still lying there in my mother's cocktail, only a light filling in a body, frail in the counter music of my brother's heart, who had another body, but was in the same time of his body that mine was in. And then 48 years later, my brother died and dropped his body on the bed. And I carried the effect of him afterwards down some coiling stairs into the streets of Boston, music, garments, literature, some beauty stuff. When he was living, we used to dare each other. I dare you, I said. I dare you. And then he died. And on that depressing note, thank you. Thanks for having me.
Thank you so much, Michael. So our next few poets are actually going to be presented through video presentations that they submitted earlier. Our next state is Connecticut, which became our fifth state on January 9th, 1788. The nutmeg or Constitution state derives its name from a Native American word, roughly meaning beside the long tidal river. It refers to the Connecticut River, which cuts through the middle of the state. Connecticut earned its nickname, the Constitution State, because it's home to what some consider the United States' first written constitution, the Fundamental Orders of Connecticut, adopted in 1639. Connecticut tonight is represented by poet Margot Schlipp. We are now going to present a recording of Margot reading from After Sworn.
Seize the day. In this large dream building, she looks for something new in the same old way. There's a great heaviness in her chest. It makes no sense to be afraid of change, so she manages to move through her days, to be in the world, even though spirits fly into her head, attach themselves to the roof of her skull. They are cutouts in robes of silver that elbow and slice. At other times, the sunlight flashes through the trees along the freeway, a message, an omen. She will not let go, won't drop the match that's struck, even as her fingers begin to burn. She thinks of cradles, of bricks, of how permanent a house's walls can feel. Everything she loves is disappearing, and half her life is gone. Her best company is the ticking of the clock. When a puff of smoke rises into the sky, her head tightens with a shift from blue to white. It is the smoke signal telling her it's time to go, to break the glass she's made of, to leave behind the courtyard's ivy and her collection of salt dips. She will never know whether, all along, she was a shadow or the fire, the darkness or the light.
Next is New York. New York was named after the British Duke of York, and many experts believe it's nicknamed the Empire State because George Washington called New York the seat of the empire. In 1624, the Dutch established a colony on what's now Manhattan Island called New Amsterdam. New York became a state on July 26, 1788. And 1 year later, George Washington was sworn in as the United States' first president in New York City, then the country's capital. The capital would move to Washington, D.C. the next year in 1790. Tonight we have a recording that features New York's selection, The Best of Archie and Mehitabel by Don Marquis, presented by John Badiger.
Hi, Don Marquis was a newspaper columnist in New York City from 1912 to 1925. He was enormously popular in his day and wrote 31 books and plays, but today we know him chiefly as the author of Archie and Mehitabel, a 1927 book of light verse and humor mixed with some pretty sharp satire. The book tells the adventures of Archie, a cockroach, that most common of New York creatures, and of Mehitabel, a rough and tumble alley cat. Don had created the characters in 1916 to comment on events and customs of the day. Reincarnation was a hot topic at the time, and Archie possessed the reincarnated soul of a poet. Mehitabel claimed to have been Cleopatra in a previous life. Their life stories were typically told in free verse, another popular fad at the time, and they were followed by newspaper readers across America. I'd like to read one of Archie's stories titled The Lesson of the Moth, first printed in the New York Evening Sun on April 14th, 1922. It next appeared in the book Archie and Mehitabel, and again, most recently in The Best of Archie and Mehitabel, published in 2011 by Alfred A. Knopf. The Lesson of the Moth. I was talking to a moth the other evening. He was trying to break into an electric light bulb and fry himself on the wires. "Why do you fellows pull this stunt?" I asked him. "Because it is the conventional thing for moths, or why? If that had been an uncovered candle instead of an electric light bulb, you would now be a small, unsightly cinder. Have you no sense?" "Plenty of it," he answered, "but at times we get tired of using it. We get bored with the routine and crave beauty and excitement. Fire is beautiful. And we know that if we get too close, it will kill us. But what does that matter? It is better to be happy for a moment and be burned up with beauty than to live a long time and be bored all the while. So we wad all our life up into one little roll and then we shoot the roll. That is what life is for. It is better to be a part of beauty for one instant and then cease to exist than to exist forever and never be a part of beauty. Our attitude towards life is come easy, go easy. We are like humans used to be before they became too civilized to enjoy themselves. And before I could argue him out of his philosophy, he went and immolated himself on a patent cigar lighter. I do not agree with him. Myself, I would rather have half the happiness and twice the longevity. But at the same time, I wish there was something I wanted as badly as he wanted to fry himself. Archie.
And now on to the Keystone State, Pennsylvania, which earned its statehood on December 12, 1787. Pennsylvania is a combination of Latin words that together means Penn's Woods. The name was created by William Penn to honor his father. Home to German immigrants, including Quakers, Mennonites, and the Amish, these settlers eventually developed their own dialect, and their descendants are now called the Pennsylvania Dutch. In 1775, Pennsylvania held the Second Continental Congress. This was when representatives from each of the colonies met for the second time after deciding to go with war with Britain. And it was during this time that Thomas Jefferson drafted the Declaration of Independence. We also know Pennsylvania is famous for another of our nation's most treasured documents, delivered by President Abraham Lincoln on November 19, 1863, the Gettysburg Address. Tonight, we feature a recording of Julia Spiker Castor for her collaborative book of poetry and photography, Shale Play.
And first of all, I'd really love to thank Allie and Joe for putting this project together there at the Georgia Center for the Book. And also thanks to the nomination from the Pennsylvania Center for the Book from Nicole and Stephen. I'm going to be reading from a book that is somewhat different from the others this year, and that's because it's a collaborative project. It's equally the work of a poet and a photographer. And so you'll be seeing photographs that accompany the two poems I plan to read. This project was begun independently and then truly collaboratively, as both Stephen Rubin and I were really curious about what was happening in Pennsylvania with natural gas drilling, fracking, and pipeline development. Shale Play, the title of the book, refers to both a geographical area and the geological area under the ground when it's being developed for oil or gas extraction. Pennsylvania has a long history of providing fuel for the eastern seaboard. First coal for the railroad, then the country's first oil wells were drilled in northern Pennsylvania, and of course that would have fueled the cars on Route 1, and now natural gas. Both New York State above Pennsylvania and Maryland to our south have bans on fracking. And this book really investigates the history and the personalities, both in the industry, opposed to the industry, people caught in the middle, and the kind of why and how and who of our experience of fracking. So the first poem I would like to read is set in a state forest where the state has leased land to fracking, and it was created after a conversation with a pipeline worker. In the Tayadatan State Forest, a man with a clipboard stands beside men welding pipes made in Korea. We're not the gas company. We just lay the pipeline. I made sure the pipe is good. The joints are welded right. This is a 12-inch to connect those wells to a compressor. That pipeline that exploded in Western Pennsylvania was 36. They're laying up to 48-inch pipes now. I grew up in Nebraska, but I own land in West Virginia. Most of these guys are from Texas, Georgia, Oklahoma. I was in the military 7 years. Japan, Korea, Kuwait, Qatar, Mississippi. I've moved around a lot, and I like that. I've laid pipe in Tioga County, Waynesburg, Scranton, Wyomissing. I go to Iowa next. Some of these guys will go to Oklahoma. Some will go up to North Dakota. Every one of these guys is divorced, once or twice. I'm divorced, but I have a girlfriend now. This is my first trip out. I said, let's just see how it goes. I know I can't work 9 to 5. I tried. I just can't walk through that same door every day. It's not an easy job. If it was easy, they'd have women and children up here. I've been on jobs where we got shot at. In Michigan, in West Virginia, a man didn't want a pipeline on his land. I understand that. He fought it and lost. So I see these protesters. Every one of them drives up to the site in a car. I don't make my own clothes, do you? They all come from China or someplace else. Did you come up here on a horse? I wish there was some other way. I could make a living as a welder, but for now, this is the best job I can get. Take care out here. You don't have reflective gear or hard hats. Steer clear of the guy on the end. He's got the X-ray. Don't want you getting filled up with radiation. A number of the poems are monologues like that, and most are quite a bit longer. And really, the book is in the spirit of Muriel Rukeyser's Book of the Dead, which was about a mining disaster in West Virginia. The next poem is in my voice, though, and it was triggered by reading a short piece on Huffington Post that was clearly written by a young woman in a kind of bemused tone in which she was profiling some of the anti-fracking activists in New York State and Pennsylvania, and kind of in the text, smiling at the fact that these grandmothers imagined they could stop a pipeline construction with their cell phones and Facebook. Hot flash. I can be driving on a highway and it flies across my face like flames over grass. Flares against the inside of my skin, scalds the back of my eyes, so hot I could steam the windshield, as when I pass another tanker truck marked residual waste, harmless as your kitchen trash my eye. Another flatbed hauling machine parts, Halliburton, in tiny letters on the driver's door, or clean white pickups with Texas plates and no words at all. I can wake in sweat-dampened t-shirts, plagued with complaints against myself. Faker, failure, bad mother or wife. I can be chopping onions, talking to my kid, and I'm lit like the Texas Eastern Transmission pipe in Edison, New Jersey. Pilots landing at Newark saw an atomic bomb from the air. Then 1,000-foot flames blazing in the night. 14 apartment buildings destroyed. Lenses melted off the headlights of cars. That was March 1994. I lived in Brooklyn, just 31 and too far away to feel the blast. All right, thanks so much. And I also thank all the fellow poets along the Route 1 corridor.
The Garden State, New Jersey, chose Tracy K. Smith's Life on Mars as their selection for Route 1 reads this year. And Delaware, the first state to ratify the US Constitution, chose Our Work, Our Words by the twin poets, Representative Nnamdi Ochoquoka and Albert Mills, whom Governor Jack Markle appointed as the 17th Poet Laureates of the state of Delaware on December 13, 2015. And now we move just south the Mason-Dixon line into the state of Maryland, the old line state. After the United States won the Revolutionary War in 1783, Annapolis, Maryland became the new country's capital, but for less than a year, and soon gained statehood on April 28, 1788. In 1850, Maryland would become an important part of the Underground Railroad, thanks to Harriet Tubman, a Maryland native who fled the state to escape slavery, but returned to rescue and lead others to freedom. Annapolis is also the home to the literary and historical memorial celebrating one of the best-selling novels of all time, Roots, the Kunta Kinte Alex Haley Memorial, located at the City Dock in historic Annapolis. Tonight we honor poet Lucille Clifton with a reading from How to Carry Water, Selected Poems, by one of the collection's editor, Arcelis Gramai.
Hi, everyone. My name is Aracelis Gramai, and I am really honored and excited to get to read Lucille Clifton's poems for you today in honor of her new selected, Lucille Clifton, How to Carry Water, selected poems, being the Route 1 Reads choice for Maryland. I had the great privilege, honor, responsibility of getting to edit this selection. And yeah, again, just really happy to get to share these poems with you today. The first poem I wanted to share is called Generations, and it's actually from Lucille Clifton's first published book of poems, Good Times, which was published in 1969. Generations. People who are going to be, in a few years, bottoms of trees bear a responsibility to something besides people. If it was only you and me sharing the consequences, it would be different. It would be just generations of men. But this business of war, these war kinds of things, are erasing those natural, obedient generations who ignored pride, stood on no hind legs, begged no water, stole no bread, did their own things. And the generations of rice, of coal, of grasshoppers, by their invisibility, denounce us. Again, published in 1969, what extraordinary vision of the earth and the crisis, environmental crises we are in and have been in. Here's another poem by Clifton that has no title. Being property once myself, I have a feeling for it. That's why I can talk about environment. What wants to be a tree ought to be, he can be it. Same thing for other things, same thing for men. I'll just read that once again, thinking of this great and radical kinship that she was attuned to born of, that she wrote about. Being property once myself, I have a feeling for it. That's why I can talk about environment. What wants to be a tree ought to be, he can be it. Same thing for other things. Same thing for men. Cutting greens. Curling them around, I hold their bodies in obscene embrace, thinking of everything but kinship. Collards and kale strain against each strange other. Away from my kiss-making hand and the iron bed pot. The pot is black. The cutting board is black. My hand, and just for a minute, the greens roll black under the knife, and the kitchen twists dark on its spine, and I taste in my natural appetite the bond of live things everywhere. I'll read a few more, and would just encourage you, if you haven't already heard the great Lucille Clifton read her own poems, you can find her work online quite easily and find her reading her poems. It is something so special, something profound to hear her reading her poems in her own voice. This Blessing the Boats at St. Mary's. May the tide that is entering even now, the lip of our understanding, carry you out beyond the face of fear. May you kiss the wind, then turn from it, certain that it will love your back. May you open your eyes to water, water waving forever, and may you, in your innocence, sail through this to that.
And now we're going to have a few more poets reading live for you this evening. Now we move into our nation's capital, the District of Columbia. In 1790, the US Congress established a 100-square-mile territory to serve as the permanent seat of the federal government. A very international city, the District of Columbia is home to more than 170 embassies and international cultural centers. More than 15% of the residents in the city speak languages other than English in their home. Tonight we feature editor Kim Roberts reading from By Broad Potomac's Shore, great poems from the early days of our nation's capital. Kim?
Thank you so much. Great to be here. So my anthology actually features poets who were writing between the city's founding in 1800 and up to about 1930. And I'm looking at 4 mother poets and 4 father poets. I include some very well-known names, poets who lived in Washington, D.C., including Walt Whitman and Paul Laurence Dunbar. But I was particularly interested in finding poets who were less well-known, in particular, women poets, working class poets, poets of color, LGBTQ poets. And so I wanted to argue with the canon. I wanted to try and enlarge our scope of what we consider great. And so I'm going to read you 2 poems by 2 women poets of color who were related. But I'll first mention a poet who I don't include in the anthology. So all of these poets were related, they were aunts. So we would have a much less rich history of African-American women poets without this one particular family, the Fortons and the Grimkeys. The Fortons lived in Philadelphia. They were the foremost free family of African-Americans in that city. And Sarah Louisa Forton was a significant early poet and an ardent abolitionist. She published under the pen name Ada, and she was the aunt of a poet by the name of Charlotte Forton Grimke, who I adore, who I wish was better known. I'm going to read a poem by Charlotte Forton Grimke. I'll first just tell you that she worked as a school teacher. She volunteered to teach in the Georgia Sea Islands during the Civil War, to teach literacy skills to formerly enslaved people. And then she was in the very first cohort of women workers for the federal government. And then she married a minister, a very well-known minister, and was very involved in the church. The poem of hers that I'm going to read is called The Gathering of the Grand Army. At the end of the Civil War, all of the Union troops came back to Washington, D.C., and they marched down Pennsylvania Avenue from the U.S. Capitol to the White House. It took 2 full days for all of the troops to march down there. And Charlotte Forton Grimke was one of the people who was in the audience watching. It was a multiracial crowd. And this is her poem about that experience. The Gathering of the Grand Army. Through all the city's streets, there poured a flood of human souls, eager, intent. One thought, one purpose stirred the people's blood, and through their veins, its quickening current sent. The flags waved gaily in the summer air, or patient watchers 'neath the clouded skies. Old age and youth and infancy were there, the glad light shining in expectant eyes. And when at last our country's saviors came in proud procession down the crowded street, still brighter burned the patriotic flame, and loud acclaims leaped forth their steps to greet. And now the veterans scarred and maimed appear, and now the tattered battle flags uprise. A silence deep one moment fills the air, then shout on shout ascends unto the skies. O brothers, ye have borne the battle strain, and you have felt it through the lingering years. For all your valiant deeds, your hours of pain, we can but give to you our grateful tears. And now, with heads bowed low and tear-filled eyes, we see a silent army passing slow. For it, no music swells, no shouts arise, but silent blessings from our full hearts flow. The dead, the living, all a glorious host, a cloud of witnesses around us press. Shall we, like them, stand faithful at our post, or weakly yield, unequal to the stress? Shall it be said the land they fought to save, ungrateful now, proves faithless to her trust? Shall it be said the sons of sires so brave now trail her scarred banner in the dust? Ah, no. Again shall rise the people's voice, as once it rose in accents clear and high. Oh, outraged brother, lift your head, rejoice. Justice shall reign, insult and wrong shall die. So shall this day the joyous promise be of golden days for our fair land in store, when freedom's flag shall float above the free, and love and peace prevail from shore to shore. Now, Charlotte Forton Grimke was the aunt of a writer who became well known during the movement that we have come to call the Harlem Renaissance. a literary movement that took place actually in several cities, not just New York, which it's named for. That's Angelina Weld Grimke. She was biracial, lesbian, born in Boston, but moved to DC and taught in the DC public schools. And when she was young and a little wild and out of control, her parents actually sent her to DC. That was the first time that she came to the capital to live with her aunt and uncle to tame her wildness a little bit. And of course, she was very influenced by her aunt and by living with her aunt. And it really brings home this need to see forebears, to see in foremothers the possibility that we could have a life of letters for ourselves. I think that's true for women, maybe particularly true for women of color. So this is Angelina Weld Grimke's poem, To Keep the Memory of Charlotte Fortin Grimke. Still there are wonders of the darkened day, the muted shrilling of shy things at night, so small beneath the stars and moon, the peace, dream frail, but perfect while the light lies softly on the leaves at noon. These are and these will be until eternity, but she who loved them well has gone away. Each dawn, while yet the east is veiled gray, the birds about her window wake and sing, and far away each day, some lark I know is singing where the grasses swing. Some robin calls and calls at dark. These are and these will be until eternity, but she who loved them well has gone away. The wildflowers that she loved down green ways stray. Her roses lift their wistful buds at dawn, but not for eyes that love them best. Only her little pansies are all gone, some lying softly on her breast. And flowers will bud and be until eternity, but she who loved them well has gone away. Where has she gone? And who is there to say? But this we know, her gentle spirit moves and is where beauty never wanes, perchance by other streams, mid other groves. And to us here, she remains, a lovely memory until eternity. She came, she loved, and then she went away.
Thank you so much, Kim, for those wonderful poems and those wonderful bits of history. Moving further south, we now cross into Virginia, the Old Dominion. Virginia became a state on June 25th, 1788, but Virginia's history goes back earlier to 1607 in Jamestown, the first English colony in what would become the United States. Virginia is also known as the mother of presidents, as 8 US presidents were born in Virginia: George Washington, Thomas Jefferson, James Madison, James Monroe, William Henry Harrison, John Tyler, Zachary Taylor, and Woodrow Wilson. A bit of Virginia floral trivia before we begin. Virginia's state tree is also its state flower, the dogwood. Joining us this evening, we have Kiki Petrosino, reading from White Blood, a lyric of Virginia. Kiki?
Thank you, Joe, and thank you everyone for being here. I'm really happy to be representing Virginia. I'm going to read 2 poems that were inspired by my contemplation of Monticello, which of course is Jefferson's great home on the mountain in Albemarle County, Virginia. Essay in Architecture. The human face, its pine doors painted like mahogany, human face with horses under each veranda. Perfect parquet tetragons of the human face still legible in old French. Sealed closet of the human face lit by oculus, design face, tinker face, factory face. Twine and bare wood comprising a pulley system for the human face, woodworked face with sunbeams settling in. Revolving buffet supporting the human face, entire pewter plate collection in the face, human face as soup tureen, as paint chip, as spit jack, smoke rings textured like the human face. Human face cured, human face pickled, human face brushed with olive oil, anchovies, and parmesan, green floor of the dome room just above the human face, floating view of the face, its quarter farms, rough cabins dotting a sloped face partly visible, human face built to resemble a great clock, great pendulum drawing faces in the air. Terrorum. Every night I go back to Mr. Jefferson's place, searching still, his kitchens, behind staircases, in a patch of shade somewhere, beside his joinery and within his small ice house, till I get down that pit lined with straw where Mr. Jefferson once stacked frozen slabs of river water until summer. Then visitors would come to him to ask about a peculiar green star or help him open up his maps. They'd kneel together on the floor among his books, lavish hunks of ice melting like the preserved tears of some antique mammal who must have wept to leave Albemarle, just as I wept when I landed in Milan for the first time, Stone City, where Mr. Jefferson began to learn the science of ice houses, how you dig into the dark flank of the land, how you seal the cavity. Leave open just one small hatch through which I might lift through gratings Mr. Jefferson's cold dressed victuals, his expensive butter and salads, the sealed jars sweating clear gems of condensation, white blood appearing from warm air, as if air could break and slough, revealing the curved arc of our shared Milan. There, I wore silver rings on each thumb. I studied and spoke in fine houses of ice. I knew a kind of crying which sealed me to such realms for good. Old magic weep, old throb in throat. How much of my fondness for any place is water, stilled and bound to darkness.
Thank you so much, Kiki. And now we move into North Carolina, which became a state on November 21st, 1789. North Carolina got the nickname the Tar Heel State because workers there used to sell tar, pitch, and turpentine made from the state's longleaf pine trees to be used in wooden ships. North Carolina was also known for a time as the Turpentine State. The pirate Blackbeard called North Carolina home and spent time ransacking ships off the coast in the early 1700s. And in 1903, brothers and inventors Wilbur and Orville Wright completed the first successful airplane ride in the dunes of Kitty Hawk, North Carolina. North Carolina is also home to famous jazz pianist Thelonious Monk and the infamous lost colony of Roanoke Island. Tonight we feature poet Tyree Day, reading from his book, Cardinal. Tyree?
Hello, everyone. I'm going to be reading from Cardinal, and I'll just say a little bit about the book. Cardinal explores narratives around the Great Migration and my own family's narratives around migration. And I'll just read 2 poems. Where she planted hydrangeas. My grandmother migrated from South Carolina to North Carolina with 3 children, a sister named Betty Lee, and a best friend named Lou. They sailed here and prayed God lined the highway with angels whose wings could hide them from every evil thing. On moonless roads, the stars gone missing. They arrived like most Black folk, looking for more than a field to turn over, to find a dead turkey vulture's feathers scorched under the truthful dirt, its wings bent as if it died, saluting the dead rabbit it stood over. What stood over them was a field the hands will never stop touching. They slept on homemade beds and ate over fires out of a cast iron pot. A whole community gathered together in the woods to pull wild onions, to pick pecans off the cold ground. All her dreams she scattered like chicken feed across the yard. My mother, aunts, and uncles ate those chickens and they sewed those dreams into us. I purple under the windowsill of those lives. Byland. I've lived on dirt roads that bent and ended at a gate of ponds. The dust skipped up didn't make my mother look like a dream. I've lived on roads that drag through America. I've paced only them to the next town. The road we kissed on is gone. Rich folks buying up all the city in which we make do. I miss when Sonny could do a wheelie all the way down Person Street and no one would call the police because he was a part of the neighborhood, like the honeysuckle bush between 2 yards. And he was beautiful, not like a horse standing alone in a yellow field, but like a man is beautiful. Most of the little towns have a road nicknamed Devil's Turn, where someone's brother died on a Saturday night while Nina sang Tell Me More and More and More and then some on the caddy's radio, the moon the color of the oldest cardinal. Every road isn't a way out. Some circle back like wolves. You can't get lost on them and they won't lose you. Others wait for you to run out of gas, then come alive with what your mother said would take you. Every road promises something like a father does, but when you arrive, the town is empty and you wait like a child questioning everything. The road itself, laughing like a drunk man falling into a roadside ditch. The road I'm walking now is howling and full of moon. Hopefully it will lead to myself. Hopefully they'll take me home. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Tyree. On May 23rd, 1788, South Carolina, the Palmetto State, earned its statehood. During the American Revolution, South Carolina hosted more battles than any other colony. The state's nickname, the Palmetto State, was coined in honor of the state tree, the sable palmetto. During the Revolutionary War, these trees were used to build forts because their soft wood could absorb a cannonball blast. South Carolina is home to baseball player Shoeless Joe Jackson, civil rights activist Marion Wright Edelman, and musicians James Brown, Chubby Checker, and Dizzy Gillespie. It is also known for its state dance, the shag. Tonight we have 2 short video presentations by Marcus Amaker for his book, The Birth of All Things.
And in the beginning, God gave your body a checklist. Keep your heart on beat and your lungs dancing with oxygen, not passive to air. Make sure the path of your blood slows down for checkpoints and avoids bumps in the road. Train your nerves to keep a balanced pace and stay within the lines of steady flow. Push forward without putting too much pressure on movement. Remember to return to water when your spirit and its frame are in drought. Treat your body like a well-rounded planet built for all seasons, or pretend you are an adaptable star. Float in the black and stay there if you need to. Save some light for yourself. In other words, rest like the sun does. Schedule some time to stay out of sight when too many people praise warm energy. Keep in mind all of these things when depression tells you nothing is working. Keep in mind all of these things when it tells you there is no invisible force connecting us, when your veins are stopped by blood clots, when your bones are dry and the water is too quick to boil. Keep in mind all of these things when it tells you that the soul is like the body, made to be broken, open to deterioration and doubt. Yes, keep in mind all of these things, but remember, even when it seems like the clock isn't ticking, you were made perfectly for this moment in time. I met America at a neighborhood bar. He offered me a shot of rum, and I reminded him that Captain Morgan was a slave owner, so the bartender awkwardly slipped another liquid lie down my throat. I ordered another drink and was channeled by dark spirits, the courage of black ghosts who haunt American dreams. I told him I loved him, and I wanted him to sleep well, but I know I've been in your nightmares, I said. I want to be your friend, but only if it's a deep relationship. Only if you show me that you are not scared of your baggage. Bring your whole history to the table. America cracked open another beer as a tear ran down his face. He said, I was born in a house not my own, and my fathers demanded that their portraits hang on every wall. White paint covers each brown brick, and our backyard is a museum of unmarked graves. Despite this, a garden grows, I said. Every home can be torn down and rebuilt again, but I've been told I shouldn't completely let you in, he said. Some people in my family stand in the doorway blocking the entrance. He left before I could tell him that my people have a history of finding ways inside broken spaces and making them whole again.
Our penultimate stop along Route 1 reads is the Peach State, the Empire State of the South, the great state of Georgia. Georgia became a state on January 2nd, 1788, and is home to President Jimmy Carter and civil rights icons Martin Luther King Jr. and Congressman John Lewis. President Franklin Delano Roosevelt was also a frequent visitor to White Springs, Georgia. Georgia is home to many literary icons, including Carson McCullers, Lillian Smith, Eugenia Price, and Terry Kay, and modern best-selling authors like Jocelyn Jackson, Karen Slaughter, and Emily Giffen. Georgia is home to some of the most diverse communities, like Clarkston, Georgia, where people from all over the world now make their home. In the spirit of making one from the many, tonight we present poet Adrienne Sue, reading from her collection, Peach State. Adrienne?
Thank you so much, Joe. Thank you, Georgia Center, for the book and all the poets. It's been just a fantastic experience to hear all of you. I'm going to read two poems from Peach State, which is a book centered around food and Atlanta. The first poem is called Chinese Restaurant Syndrome. The notion that the children awaiting dumplings will never know their grandparents. The chance that the Peking duck, though crispy and succulent, is not the artist's medium. The likelihood that your hometown stopped existing before you knew this would be permanent. Being recognized each time. The possibility that the place will be robbed due to location, its spurning of credit. The years that have passed since you saw your uncles. The gratitude with which you clean your house, placeless and beautiful. The safety of your neighborhood. The ritual by which friends who share your heritage fight for the check. The appreciation of friends who do not, as you explain the pickled cabbage, the absence of fish from fish fragrance. The hands of two women in a corner booth, shelling peas. Roast pork like your grandmother's, in vast portions. The assumption that rice and tea are always free. Your children growing up, seeking their fortunes. The other poem is situated in the Atlanta airport, and its title is a saying that's often said outside Atlanta. It's called, "Even when you die and go to heaven, you have to change planes in Atlanta." If your final destination is the ATL, welcome home. You're already in heaven. If you're bound for Huntsville, Valdosta, or Charleston, it'll take a bit longer from where you sickened or fell. Stop by for an ultimate supper at the Varsity Grill. Haunt the plane train pride of Hartsfield Jackson. Even if your final destination is the ATL, welcome home. You're already in heaven. Your card will not be charged for this airport hotel. We have unlimited flights should you miss your connection. If by mistake you packed liquids or weapons, set them aside. We'll divert them to hell. And if your final destination is the ATL, welcome home. You're already in heaven. Thank you.
Thank you so very much, Adrian. Those are truly, truly very representative of Georgia. Our final stop on Route 1 Reads is the Sunshine State, Florida, whose original Spanish name is La Florida, which means place of flowers. Some historians think Spanish conquistador Ponce de Leon chose the name to honor the blooming flowers he saw there, or in tribute to Spain's Easter celebration called La Pascua Florida, or Feast of the Flowers. In 1821, Spain gave up Florida to the United States in exchange for Spanish rule over Texas. Florida officially became the 27th state on March 3rd, 1845. And Florida selected Peter Meineke's Lucky Bones for the 2021 Route 1 Reads selection for Florida. We have put links where you can order some of the poets' books. We also encourage you once again to check out your independent bookstores to get those selections. You can find an entire list of the poetry books on route1reads.org, and you can also browse through our past year's selections as well. And our assistant here at the Georgia Center for the Book, Allie, has made a wonderful program for tonight's event. You can find the link over in the chat, and it features descriptions of all of these books of poetry and biographies of the poets as well. Well, folks, it seems that there is a lot of praise, and I think that we truly have been honored and blessed with these lyrical words of wisdom. And so rather than keep us on any more this evening, I think we have some beautiful poetry to ponder in our homes and to take those words and those sentiments into our hearts. I thank you all for allowing us into your homes this evening to share with you the work of these 16 wonderful poets, and I do hope that you read and enjoy all of their books of poetry. Thank you so much from the Georgia Center for the Book and from all the affiliate centers on the East Coast. Have a wonderful evening, and we will see you all again very, very soon.